Oh, welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday, and Dominic Salee, we're here midway through the week, here for another episode that's just a bit extra special. How are you doing so far this week?
It's hump day, so I'm doing fantastic, obviously.
Of course.
And this was fun because we're doing another classic pay-per-view review, this time UFC 199. Went back, watched it together, like a little watch party kind of deal. That was fun. Didn't get to do that for UFC 1, so now we're kind of just starting a tradition, it seems. And this is a lot of fun. I can't wait to go into this with you. And I know it's special, a little extra special to you.
True. First, I just want to say before I kind of talk about the impact of UFC 199, I'm getting excited. We're getting very close to Friday where we preview UFC 258. It's just a fight it's a fight that feels like it's for us hardcore fans, you know? Not a fight with a ton of star power or however you want to word it, but a lot of future stars, a lot of people on the rise, people that go under the radar, and title fight that's so intriguing. I'm very awesome. Very excited to break that down and also watch that with you this Saturday. But yeah, UFC 199. So, you know, I've kind of touched on this in our pilot episode, kind of my story with UFC, and you know, many people might be surprised, you know, because I feel pretty good about my knowledge of the sport at this point.
You're very knowledgeable.
However, I'm in comparison to many viewers of the sport, especially people who watch it as much as I do, I'm a fairly newer viewer. And I kind of hate that, but at the same time, like, I'm proud of the work I put in over these years.
You've made,
But yeah, June 4th, 2016 was the very first time I watched a UFC event live. And a lot of that just goes back to the fact that growing up, I did have some, what would you call it, kind of fleeting interest in the sport at times. You know, I mentioned in the pilot episode how Brock Lesnar, when he became heavyweight champion, kind of first sparked my interest because I grew up a big WWE fan. So I would look up, you know, his fights with Frank Mir and what was one of his...
Oh, there's so many off the top of my head. Heath Herring was
Heath
a really
Herring
good one,
is the one I was thinking
where he
of.
railed him and charged across the
I don't know
octagon.
why. Shout out to Heath Herring. He deserved more than me for getting your name right there. But, yeah, like I would just watch those clips on YouTube. Because back then, YouTube was kind of the Wild West. You know, you didn't have all these strict copyright laws that you got today. So you could kind of find some of that stuff on there. But the reason why I never really watched it was because you have to recognize I'm only 23 now. So back then I was
a wee lad.
11, 12. I didn't have a credit card. I was not able to order these pay-per-views. And my parents at this point in their lives, you know, they were very interested in it back in the 90s, funny enough, but they weren't watching UFC every month. You know, I know your dad was very into it, so that kind of helped you get at least a leg up from the start. You know, you were watching some of the Chuck and Tito days.
Yeah, why he would have poker parties in the basement.
Yeah, so in that way, like, I just never was able to really catch on to the sport. You know, WWE was a lot easier because you could watch it every week, or watching Raw, SmackDown. It was free. It was free, and then watching other sports like football, baseball, basketball, much easier because you could watch them on what was free to me. Watch it on cable. So yeah, it took a while, but you invited me to your basement for a little watch party. We had a few friends over to watch UFC 199, and it was a great event. And I immediately just fell in love with it. And a lot of that is a credit to who I was watching it with. We were all like kind of, you know, you were the only one who was really like passionate about it. Like everyone else was just kind of excited to watch people beat the shit out of each other. But that made it so much fun because we were all just there, like just kind of feeding off each other's energy, just getting into it. You know, I didn't know who most of the fighters on this card were. I was just like, somebody hit somebody.
Yeah. And little did we know that same group would go on to UFC 203 in
Was
Cleveland.
that who? Was it Nick and Tommy that were there?
I believe so. There may have been a couple others, but I know for sure those two. So.
Yeah, so, you know, shout out to you for inviting me over. We just graduated high school.
Fresh out, yeah.
Yeah, and then 2 months after this, we would move in to our freshman dorms at college, and that was, so it was nice, my future roommate invite me over like that. But
you purchased Fight Pass then. We went to Cleveland for 203.
Literally,
it was a snowball.
Literally,
this started it.
I think when we moved in, we would go and watch UFC 202, which was headlined by Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz 2, and we watched that at B-Dubs. First ever card we watched at B-Dubs, which that kind of became a tradition for us pre-COVID.
Fight nights in the lounge area.
Fight nights in the lounge, we did that a few times, and I remember you telling me about Fight Pass, $10 a month. You can watch literally any event in the history of the UFC. I was like, I bought a year.
Yeah.
I think it was $60 for the year. Bought it. Over the course of that year, I basically dedicated much of my... Instead of watching like TV shows every week, like a show I remember being super into going into college was The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Me, my dad, and my sister would watch it every week together. We went to conventions. I mean, nerdy as fuck. And then we moved into college, and I remember me and you would kind of watch like the first couple episodes. But after that, I was like, I have no time for other TV.
Yeah.
I'm watching UFC.
Fight Pass or die.
I'm watching, I don't know. Oh, what event am I watching today? Oh, Randy Couture becoming the heavyweight champ at 44 years old.
Yeah.
That's the shit I was doing.
It's my casual Tuesday night.
Yep. So I'm proud, and now at this point I can officially say I've seen every single pay-per-view, main card, up until present day, and I'm working on getting there with the fight nights.
And now you can share all of this quickly garnered knowledge with people that you were in their same shoes just 4 years ago.
So I understand, because MMA is a pretty fickle fan base. Love them. We love MMA Twitter. They're very funny. We're still trying to kind of get more involved with the community, but I love the community, but it can be a fickle fan base, and they're very protective over their sport from outsiders. You see it a lot with the media. Stephen A. Smith and guys like Skip Bayless who have these takes. I remember Skip Bayless talking about leading up to the rematch with McGregor-Diaz. He said that Diaz likely outweighed McGregor by 30 pounds and that he was a sumo-style wrestler.
Come again?
That just shows that even though we're on ESPN and ABC and all this stuff.
So very new.
Yep. And I understand why they're very protective from these outsiders, and I think that a lot of people would probably look at me, some of these people that have been watching for 20 years, and they'd probably kind of scoff at me, like, what can you tell me that I don't know? You've only been watching for like 5. I get it. But for those people who are maybe intimidated by that, by trying to get more involved with the sport, because they're like, oh, everybody just seems to be so like against me even trying to get into it. I get it, people, and stick to it. Because it's a beautiful sport. There are so many amazing fights for you to watch. I ain't saying you got to do what I do. Have an Excel sheet with all these different analytics of all the fights I've watched.
A podcast.
Yeah, I ain't saying you got to do all that. But I'm just saying, keep going.
Yeah.
But that's enough kind of
I love the backstory there.
Sometimes you got to...
I mean, we call it extra special.
You got to paint the picture sometimes.
This is true.
But... we're talking about UFC 199. This event happened June 4th, 2016 at the Forum in Inglewood, California. 15,587 people in attendance. Approximately 300,000 buy rate. Not a super high selling pay-per-view. But one of the reasons for that probably is because 17 days before this card happened, our original main event fell out.
Yep.
Originally, it was supposed to be Luke Rockhold in his first title defense against the previous champion who he had taken the belt from, Chris Weidman.
Weidman was a big star at this time.
He was. I mean, Weidman was the guy who had beat Anderson Silva technically.
He was undefeated until that Luke Rockhold
He
fought.
beat Silva twice, and then he went on to beat Machida and Belfort. He was looked at as like a dominant champion.
The All-American guy.
Yeah. And then, he had that big, costly mistake at UFC 194 against Rockhold. He threw that spinning wheel kick.
Yeah.
And Weidman being this very grapple heavy wrestler, and even when he did do offense on the feet, it was usually with his hands. You never saw a ton of kicks from Weidman.
It shocked a lot of people.
And then that immediately gave up his back for the takedown, and then the ground and pound was brutal for the next couple rounds. It was rough go of things for Weidman after that. So they set up a rematch. Well, Weidman can't make it. So who steps in? Michael Bisping, a man who Rockhold had already beaten.
Yep.
I think a lot of people might not realize that today, especially once we get into what happened, but Rockhold had already beaten Bisping, so I think...
By finish as well.
Yep. Second round guillotine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people maybe had a waning interest in this because your co-main event was also for a title. It was for the bantamweight title. Dominic Cruz, another dominant champion.
Yep.
Probably still to this day, the best
bantamweight.
Best UFC bantamweight of all time. And he was in finishing his trilogy with Uriah Faber. I don't know if there was I don't remember there, even after I kind of got more into it, I don't remember this rivalry really having a ton of interest.
It wasn't like some of the other trilogies.
I think most people thought that Cruz was just
Dominic
too
was just so good. Yeah.
Even though Uriah had won their first encounter, but that was Cruz being so young. And
Uriah was still getting older at this time, too.
So I think even though you have a 2-title fight card here, I just don't think that there was a ton of interest going in from the more casual viewers that really do inflate those pay-per-view buy numbers.
And this was in the middle of heavy Conor McGregor days, too. So,
so you were seeing these million plus buys for the UFC, which were unprecedented.
Yeah.
So here you get a more quaint 300,000, but nothing to scoff at.
Yeah.
Still a decent number. Commentary team, the classic combo: Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. I mean, that's classic UFC.
Let me pose one question real quick about commentary.
Okay.
2 people or 3 people? What do you prefer? Because that's about all we see these days.
So what's funny is I love the 3-person setup now. I do. I really do. Even when you throw Rogan in there, like you have Rogan, DC, and Anik. Really, they have such a great group now.
They do, yeah.
That I think that the 3-person team works.
Yeah.
However, I couldn't imagine adding a 3rd person to this duo.
To Goldberg and Rogan. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I know Goldberg is kind of a controversial, I guess, figure at this point. He's iconic due to... he had been with the UFC forever.
It was just the way him and Rogan paired together.
Yeah, and I just thought him and Rogan were an amazing team, and I stand by Mike Goldberg as a commentator. I thought he was fantastic for the years he worked for the UFC.
Now with Bellator. Could
he be a little catchphrasey, kind of repeat himself at times? Sure, but I really never minded, it's all over. It's not but some people got annoyed by that. I thought it was fine.
No, everybody's got their niche.
If I'm in the heat of the moment, I'm not really...
I don't care what he says.
Yeah, as long as he's excited, I'm excited too, and that's fine. But I think kind of his... he would... we'll talk about this at the end, but he went on to do Bellator. That's what he's doing now. I would say it's probably gotten a little worse. Maybe it's just his motivation isn't as high anymore. And we'll touch on that at the end, but... Yeah, so classic commentary team. Also want to touch on the fact that they announced on this night, during the main card, that UFC 8 and Ultimate 96 tournament winner, Don Fry, would be inducted into the Hall of Fame at International Fight Week, which would happen next month, UFC 200. Don Fry, out of the going back and watching those really early cards, Don Fry was my favorite guy to watch. I love Don Fry.
That's who The Rock is making a movie on, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-mm.
Is that a different
You're thinking of this Mark Kerr.
Oh, yeah.
The Smashing Machine.
Yep, that's true.
I can see why you would say that. But no, Don Fry, the mustache, just a dude that you looked like you didn't want to fuck with. And maybe you could say that about a lot of guys.
That's all they looked then.
And I know that doesn't help, but Don Fry just had this presence about him, man. And yeah, he was kind of the bridge between those guys like Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock to a guy like Mark Coleman, who kind of established a style reigning supreme in a more traditional sense. I know jiu-jitsu reigned supreme in the early events, but I mean a lot of those were street fights looking. They weren't very well put
This is
together.
when it started to get a little more...
Yeah, there's more technique,
normal,
and then you would get to Mark Coleman, and then that's really where the technique picked up and stuff. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for Don Fry. He even had a short run in the WWE, fun fact, when it was WWF back in the late 90s. So yeah, he would be announced here. Before we kind of get into our main card, which was what we went back and watched, we're going to do a little thing called Prelim Notables.
Yeah. Prelim Notables.
So, our whole card opened with the fight of the night. So, our early prelims were on UFC Fight Pass. The regular prelims were on Fox Sports 1.
Oh, the Fox days.
And then, obviously, main card on pay-per-view. Our very first fight, though, on Fight Pass was fight of the night. Marco Polo Reyes got a knockout of Dong Hyun Kim, 1 minute 52 seconds of the third round. Some other notables. If you go to the regular prelims, were stacked with notable names here. I mean, Alex Caceres got
a fight night.
Yeah, he got a unanimous decision win over Cole Miller. Jessica Andrade, the future women's strawweight champion, here soon, probably get a challenge for the women's
After
flyweight
this bout,
title.
we got to see her in Cleveland.
Yep, she TKO'd Jessica Penne, 2 minutes 56 seconds of the second round. Then a guy we just talked about, Beneil Dariush, in a fight that maybe we never really talked about, but it's interesting, right? Because we talked about both these guys.
Exactly, yeah.
He knocked out James Vick. James Vick's first knockout loss, and what's funny is this was not the James Vick who got knocked out four
James
straight
Vick
times.
went on a tear after this. And Dariush knocked him out 4 minutes 16 seconds of the very first round. Our prelim headliner, Brian Ortega, T-City. Who the fuck is that guy?
Knocking out Clay Guida with a knee with 20 seconds left in the fight. Awesome stuff right there.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Long hair Ortega, by the way.
Yep, long hair Ortega. So, those are your prelim notables. Anything you wanted to touch on before we get into the main card?
Just one more thing about the hair. Ortega versus Guida? Holy moly.
That's a hair fight.
Oh, my goodness. That's all I had.
Shout out to those guys for not pulling on it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, our main card here opens up with a fight that another couple guys that we've talked about here.
This was
recently.
funny turning this on because I totally forgot about this.
Yeah, so we had a lightweight fight between Dustin Poirier and Bobby King Green.
Wow.
Now, to kind of talk about where these guys were at this point in their career, Dustin Poirier was at a very interesting point. You know, he had lost his last fight at flyweight to Conor McGregor, the fight that we talked about so much in the lead up to their rematch. That had happened about 2 years before this fight we're talking about now with Bobby Green. After the Conor McGregor loss, he would move up to lightweight and knock off 3 straight wins, knocking out Diego Ferreira, TKOing Yancy Medeiros, and again, unanimous decision win over Joe Duffy, a guy who had beat Conor McGregor before. So that's kind of where he is at this point. He was ranked, I believe it, what I say earlier.
He was 5th.
No,
right?
It was like 11th.
Oh, yeah, he was double digits.
Yep. So he was ranked 11th at the time, so still kind of a guy, much in the same mold of a guy like you, a guy you love, like Sadiq Yusuf or, Arnold Allen. These guys that are right at the cusp of reaching a contender status, but still young, still really working their way up, but still looked at as prospect really. And on the other end, you get Bobby Green, who had a bit of an interesting. He was also at an interesting point here because his last fight before this was against Edson Barboza, a fight he would lose via unanimous decision. But before that, he had 8 straight wins. 4 of those in the UFC, 4 of those in Strikeforce. So Bobby Green was ranked 13th, but I think probably a lot of people going into this fight were probably siding with Bobby. I mean, that resume speaks for itself. His UFC wins were over Jacob Volkman, James Krause, Pat Healy, and Josh Thompson. And then you lose to Edson Barboza. I mean, I could totally see someone siding with Bobby Green here. Now, I'm going to let you kind of talk about the action of the fight. I know it was pretty quick, but if you just want to kind of go...
it was just the boxing of Dustin as we've seen, the evolution, and this was still early on, especially in the lightweight days, but the crisp boxing, still getting hit. Bobby Green was landing shots, but the crisp shots of Dustin were no match, and he just kept landing the shots and eventually put Bobby Green away, dropped him once earlier in the first round. And then what was the final time in the first round where he got that finish?
It was
near the end.
2 minutes, 53 seconds.
2:53, actually. Okay, so he dropped him once before that, so it was all Dustin.
The first drop was probably like just over a minute in.
Yeah, and it was funny because it had right before the drop, and the knockout. Bobby Green was kind of talking that shit.
He was definitely looking a little...
telling Dustin to bring it.
A little overconfident, and then Dustin brought it.
And put him down.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very quick fight. Dustin making pretty easy work here. You know, Bobby just really never was able to get started. I mean, that was kind of the story here, is Dustin was pretty aggressive, and that's not something that you can always say for Dustin Poirier. You know, sometimes he gets that reputation of being kind of a slow starter, but...
It also goes to show some of the maturity that he started to gain after the Conor loss, because Conor was always talking and mocking him, and he couldn't handle that. But then we see it here just, 4 fights after the Conor loss.
Yeah.
And he's getting mocked mid-fight, stays headstrong, and knocks the guy out for it. So we begin to see that maturity, and now when you look at Dustin, none of that bothers him at all, obviously. But it's showing where he started that evolution.
Right. And following this fight, things would not necessarily get any easier for Bobby Green. He, at this point, lost 2 straight. He would go on to lose a split decision to Rashid Magomedov. I'm going to be honest. Before looking this up, I didn't even know who Rashid Magomedov was. So I know that this was a step down for him. That would happen on the UFC on Fox card, headlined by Demetrius Johnson and Wilson Hayes. So April 15, 2017, that means that after this fight to Poirier, he basically was gone for about 7-8 months. So then he loses there, announces he retires on Instagram, but then he would end up coming back, or no, sorry.
I was going to say, it was after the Trinaldo one.
Sorry. So that made 3 straight losses.
Right.
Then, at UFC 216, headlined by Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee, he would go to a split draw with Lando Venata, a very tough fighter.
Yeah.
But a fight where it was a draw due to the fact that Venata was deducted a point. So another fight that he would have lost probably if not for an illegal knee. It was given fight of the night, though, so he did get a nice bonus. And they later ran it back. Yeah. However, after that, he would bounce back with a win, a unanimous decision win over Eric Koch. That would happen on Jacare Souza versus Derek Brunson 2, UFC on Fox card there. That was January 2018. And then he would go on to finish 2018 with a loss to Drakkar Klose, unanimous decision. That was on the UFC on Fox card, Kevin Lee versus Ally Aquina 2. It's the very last.
That was the last
Fox card.
Right, yeah, network television, I should say.
And then he would lose via unanimous decision to Francisco Trinaldo. That was on the Jan Blachowicz versus Jacare Souza card. That was November 2019. So he took basically a year off between these losses. And after that, he would announce that he had retired. But he would come back literally in June of 2020. And then you would kind of see him go on a nice little run here in 2020. King of the Apex. He got the wins over Clay Guida, Lando Venata, Alan Patrick. And then he did lose his last fight to Thiago Moises. But we will be seeing him fight this Saturday.
Yep.
So the book is not... The ink is not dry on Bobby Green's story. He's still got a ways to go.
He looked great last year in 2020.
Yeah, and Moises has really made a nice run for himself. Yeah. So as long as Thiago keeps looking the way he's been looking, then, I mean, really, that loss is going to look better. And that was a
razor-thin
It was.
fight.
So Bobby Green kind of had an interesting run after this. Not really great, considering he was looked at very high prospect at one point. On the reverse end, though, Dustin Poirier, actually, after this fight, it was basically probably the worst part of his run at lightweight, because he would get knocked out by Michael Johnson, a fight that every time Michael Johnson fights, I'm going to talk about it. He got knocked out a minute 35 seconds into the fight. That was the headliner of a fight night, September 2016.
Pretty bad knockout.
It was literally 4 months after this win over Bobby Green. However, he would bounce back with a majority decision win over Jim Miller at UFC 208. Then you kind of had that no contest with the illegal knees against Eddie Alvarez. So even though that wasn't a loss, and I don't believe he wasn't the one that landed the knee.
No, it was Eddie that did it.
But this time period, this kind of 2016 to 2017, it felt like Dustin's career wasn't really going anywhere.
It was at a stalemate.
It was at a stalemate. But not to be kept down, Poirier would go on right after this to go on his finest run. I mean, look at this killer's row. He headlined a fight night against Anthony Pettis and would get that submission, a body triangle. That was fight of the night. Then he would get a TKO over Justin Gaethje. That was fight of the night. Then he TKO'd Eddie Alvarez. That was performance of the night.
All fight night headliners, I think. All three of those.
All three of them. And then he would go on to headline a pay-per-view with Max Holloway for the interim lightweight championship at UFC 236. And he really brought the fight to Max. Max had his moments, but Dustin nearly swept the cards. It was 4-1. We called it
a clear 4-1, yeah.
And not a lot of people probably gave Dustin much of a shot there because Max had looked unstoppable at featherweight. But he gets a big win there. He would lose in the fight to kind of unify the belts against Khabib via rear naked choke.
But who doesn't?
But then right after that, he has a fight of the year contender of 2020 against Dan Hooker, a fight he would win. And then we just talked about a month ago, a little less than that, he TKO'd Conor McGregor in a rematch, his biggest win of his career. And now, I mean, really, the world is yours.
He is essentially the puppet master of the lightweight division right now.
Yeah, so. I mean, he can kind of do whatever he wants, it seems like. So, things turned out all right for Poirier, but like kind of an immediate aftermath. It didn't look like that. Right. It looked like, this was such a big win, and then you follow that up by getting starched by Michael Johnson, who was no slouch at this time either. But, just very interesting to see kind of how these two guys' careers went. It definitely showed that Poirier was the better fighter here, and he's had the better career thus far.
Yep.
So then after this, we're going to move on to our second fight of the main card at middleweight. Legend right here.
Fight of the night as well. For us.
Yeah, if of the main card. Definitely
the
fight of the night. Dan Henderson, who was, I believe, 44, 45 at the time, going up against Hector Lombard, who was a big signing for the UFC. And
never lived up to it seems.
Yeah, but. So on Dan's end, again, I just mentioned he was about 45 coming into this fight.
Been there, done that.
He really had, man, and I'm not going to go through every fight he had. He kind of bounced around a lot. He started in Pride back in the early 2000s. At least that's where he started, when gaining traction. After his Pride days, he would have a run in the UFC, including a title fight with Anderson Silva. Yep. He would have some big wins there against like Rich Franklin. He knocked out Michael Bisping at UFC 100.
Brutally.
After that win, he goes to Strikeforce. Has a really
Did
good...
he win the belt at Strikeforce or no?
Yes, he won the light heavyweight championship. So he would win that against Rafael Cavalcante, but he never defended. His next fight for Strikeforce was actually at heavyweight against Fedor, and he would TKO.
Yeah, he knocked. Yeah.
Then he moves on to the UFC again for his second run. And guess what his first fight was back?
I'm blanking.
UFC 139 against Mauricio Shogun Hua. What is considered one of the best fights.
Yeah, that was in our top 10, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. But then after this is when I think his age started to show. He would lose 3 straight to Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, and Vitor Belfort. The Vitor fight being that head kick KO, which Vitor was doing to everybody, but still disgusting. And then he would knock out Shogun Hua in their rematch. And then he would lose 2 more fights to Daniel Cormier, Gegard Mousasi.
I forgot he fought DC.
Yeah. Then he would knock out Tim Bosch. And then he would lose via KO again to Vitor Belfort in their third encounter of their career. And that leads us here. So really, this second run for him in the UFC has been really disappointing. Because after beating Shogun Hua in his welcome back fight, he was supposed to headline UFC 151 against John Jones, which was the first ever pay-per-view to be canceled because Dan couldn't make it. So then the UFC tried to call on Chael Sonnen.
John's camp turned it down.
Yeah, it was Mike
Jackson Wink.
Yeah. He advised John not to take the fight, too much of a risk, and therefore the whole pay-per-view was canceled. So after that, losing the 3 straight, yeah, sure, he would knock out Shogun and Tim Bosch, but I mean, the record's very mixed coming into this fight here. And that would show in the fact he was only ranked 14th.
And to think what came next.
Well, he's going up against Hector Lombard, who had not had a very easy run of things either. up to this point. He was a big signing. He was a big deal for Bellator. Coming into his debut in the UFC, his record was 31-2-1.
What a freaking animal.
And he looked like every bit of it, too.
Yes, he did.
But his debut, he would lose to Tim Boesch, split decision. And sure, he would knock off some wins. You know, he knocked out Husamar Palhares, another guy that looks like, they kind of look alike, funny enough. He would lose another split decision to Yushin Okami. But then he had 2 back-to-back wins over Nate Marquardt and Jake Shields. Actually, he would technically win 3 straight. He followed that up with the win over Josh Berkman. It got overturned because guess what? Old Lombard tested positive for some anabolic steroids. I'm shocked.
He's a big guy.
And once he would come back from that suspension, he would lose to Neil Magny via TKO, and here we are.
I see a lot of red.
Well, we'll get there. But, so, kind of coming in here, it's definitely looking like already this is not the same.
Monster signing is
This is not the same Hector Lombard that the UFC had signed from Bellator. And there was probably even more questions due to the fact that he had tested positive for anabolic steroids. I mean, he was already a huge guy, and in this fight, he still looked huge.
What was the delay between when that fight and his next
fight?
So
the fight against Berkman happened at UFC 182. That was January 3rd, 2015. He would fight Neil Magny March 20th, 2016. So a year and 2 months later. And then this fight was June 2016. So
probably a first-time offense. So not too long.
And being TKO'd by Magny, pretty quick turnaround. Only a 3-month turnaround here. So, you know, we don't see that tend to work out for a lot of guys who have been knocked out.
And that was in Magny's tear. That was the year where Magny won like 5 fights in a year, if I'm not mistaken.
So, again, I'm going to give you the floor to talk about the action here because really round 1 was pretty much...
What fight is Dan Henderson in that's not just a slobber knocker?
But round 1, he was having the fight brought to him.
Yes, knocked down, I think, twice in that first round. Lombard just landing monster shots. Hendo, of course, firing back just because that's his instinct to just keep firing when he's hurt. He makes it out of round 1, gets to the stool. Then round 2 happens, and we see a knockout that, truthfully, I don't think I've ever seen before, and I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Dan Henderson throws a body kick. Hector essentially catches it, and as Hendo's body is twisted, he just takes his elbow, right? Mm-hmm. And he just throws it to the side. Just right onto the temple. Mm-hmm. Hector goes down like a sack of potatoes.
Hector goes down like Woody when Andy walks in the room. It was really like Andy's coming, and Hector dropped.
Henderson gets on top for the brutal, I must add. He drops 2 when Henderson knocks somebody out, he's going to make sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys have ever seen the probably more iconic knockout of Michael Bisping at UFC 100, you know, he knocks him out with the Hendo bomb in the right hand, and then
he's like,
whoop, just drops another right. Yeah, he literally just dunks on him with another right hand as he's literally stiff as plank from Ed and Eddie.
Yeah.
And
he does it again here, except with 2 elbows.
Yeah, with 2 elbows. I mean,
Herb Dean couldn't get there quick enough.
I know Hector Lombard tested positive for steroids, but I don't think there was a lot of bad blood between these two.
You don't have to do him like that.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Bisping one, Bisping was talking a lot of shit. Like I kind of get it.
Yeah.
This one was arguably worse. He landed 2.
Yeah, it was bad.
And it was elbows.
All elbows. All 3 shots were elbows.
And, I was like, man, he didn't have to do Hector like that. But it was still... I remember when I was watching this live with you, that was the moment where I went, this sport's fucking awesome. Not because of what he did after the knockout, just the fact that he saw this 45-year-old man just kick.
Such a strange
because I was like
KO.
watching this, I was like, oh, this huge Hector Lombard guy is gonna destroy this old ass man.
Yeah.
And then Dan Henderson said, "Hold my elbows."
Right to the side.
Yeah.
The ageless wonder, Dan Henderson.
Truly, I mean, it was an awesome fight though. Just again, kind of that slobber knocker type mold, you know. Not that these guys were lacking technique, but I mean, round 1, Henderson was hurt early.
Oh, yeah.
Hurt a few times. Hector just couldn't get the job done, though. Dan showing off that
just
even at that age,
iron chin, man,
iron
really.
chin. And, he'd been knocked out a few times at that point, but
it never quite gave all the way through.
It really didn't. And then round 2, I mean, again, it was kind of a lot of the same. I mean, I would argue. I mean, the knockout came a minute 27 into the second round, so let's take that for what it is. But the first minute or so, I thought Hector was still doing his thing. I thought if the fight continued like that, he was probably going to win that second round. And then out of nowhere, just that little elbow to the temple just completely flatlined him.
Mm-hmm.
Another note, I probably should have mentioned this at the top talking about this one. This was Hector Lombard's return to middleweight. So he had fought at welterweight for a few times before this. After the Neil Magny loss.
That guy fought at welterweight?
Crazy. So he moved back up to middleweight. And I guess it didn't really go his way here either.
No.
And that's where we're going to... So, after this loss, he's lost 2 straight. You got to know that's got to be weighing on him because he was looked at as a big deal. At this point, he was 34-6-1. Only 2 losses coming into the UFC, and now you've dropped 4 before you've even won 4. Not a great look, right? It didn't get any easier. After this fight, he would fight February 2017 against Johnny Hendricks.
Big rig.
A fight he would lose via unanimous decision. That was on a fight night headlined by Derek Lewis and Travis Brown.
Oh, I remember that.
Where Ronda's fine ass at.
Yep.
Then he would get TKO'd in September 2017 by Lionheart, Anthony Smith.
Oh, yeah. That was at middleweight.
Back when Anthony fought at middleweight. And that was the fight night headlined by Luke Rockhold and David Branch.
Full circle.
And then, at this point, we're at 4 straight losses.
Yeah.
Let's make it 5.
Okay.
He would be disqualified at UFC 222 in a fight against CB Dalloway due to... Basically, he hit Dalloway twice after the bell, and Dalloway wasn't able to continue.
Ooh.
So he was disqualified, and that was after the very first round. So to make that 5 straight losses, well...
Make it 6.
Let's make it 6. His very final fight of his entire pro MMA career, he would lose a unanimous decision to Talis Leites. Fight night headlined by Thiago Santos and Eric Anders.
Man, that
was September 22nd, 2018 in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Tough. So
his career ended, mind you, coming into the UFC, he was 31-2-1. So 31-2, we'll just say.
And he finished
34-10.
Wow.
The man went
3-8,
2-8,
2-8.
Wait,
3-8,
3-8
in the UFC. Wow, with 6 straight losses.
And if you want to count that no contest as a win, it's 4-8.
Wow.
And I mean, he lost. After this fight, he would go on to lose 4 more straights and make it 6 straight.
And this is a big deal. This guy was a massive signing for the UFC.
Yeah, people won't remember it now just because it feels the way MMA works is so constantly moving.
Moves quick, yeah.
He was unranked in this fight, but I mean, a lot of that's just because of the layoff and the fact that he lost. I mean, this was his first fight back at middleweight. But yeah, he was a big deal for the UFC, and he just never could live up. And not only did he not live up, but he was bad. I mean, there's really no way around it. I mean, when you lose 6 straight, like you just... Yeah. And I know that they're not bad competition, but...
It sucks. It's a shame.
It really comes off like once he was off the juice, he just wasn't the same guy.
And we see that with a lot of people.
More than we probably know.
You can see when the USADA era begins, you know.
You talk about the guys like Johnny Hendricks or some of these other guys, but...
Vitor.
Yeah, Vitor, Alistair Overeem, guys like that. But here it was like the most just obvious because he did test positive, and then you see after that he basically couldn't win a fight. It's crazy. On the other end, however, we have Dan Henderson, and this one's pretty easy. He had one more fight after this.
For a title at UFC 204 in Manchester, England. He fought as, I believe he was ranked 13th. He was 13th when he got the title fight. Yeah.
And it would be against the guy who we'll be talking about a little bit later, Michael Bisping. And it was a rematch because they had fought at UFC 100.
Yep.
And maybe the less said about Dan Henderson getting that title fight, the better. But it ended up being an awesome fight.
I think really their main reasoning for doing it was like, this is his retirement fight.
Yeah, I think it was
that. Was like the only justifiable
I think it
thing.
was that, and I think Bisping wanted it.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to get that win back. And
so, it is what it is. Hey, the fight lived up. I mean,
it was an awesome fight.
Good
And
fight.
arguably, Dan won, arguably.
Yeah, I agree.
And that would have been crazy if he had won
in
that.
England, too.
Yeah, so he goes out on a loss, but not one to hang your head on.
For a belt, man.
Yeah, what a career for that guy. I mean, yeah, it sure was the later part of his career were a lot more mixed than maybe we like to remember.
He's a legend.
Yeah, but I mean, the competition was just... And this guy was doing it in his mid-40s.
Yeah, a legend of all mixed martial arts.
And I think this Hector Lombard one might have been his finest of that later part of his career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the knockout over Shogun, but just this fight with Hector Lombard, it just...
The fashion he did it.
Yeah, just the fact that he was able to come back after being hurt bad multiple times and able to land that knockout punch. I mean, it just showed what a badass he still was, even at his old age. Kind of like, who says you can't teach a dog old dog new tricks?
Exactly.
Right? Interesting fight moving into here.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Max Holloway. This fight was at featherweight. Max Holloway, who was ranked 4th at the time, going up against the guy right below him, number 5 ranked, Ricardo Lamas.
This was Max's last non-title fight all the way until just this past January against Calvin Kattar.
I love that fact.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. So we've talked about Max in detail because we just previewed and recapped one of his fights. But coming into this fight, Max was on a tear. There's no other way around it.
9-fight win streak coming in.
And some of those names, the last 3 fights, I mean, you look at just the last 3. That's all I'm going to mention. Cub Swanson.
Killer.
Guillotine choke. Charles Oliveira, TKO.
All-time leader in submissions, by the way.
Jeremy Stevens, decision. And then you get this Ricardo Lamas fight. I mean, it was obvious that with the win here, in the broadcast, what's funny is Joe Rogan talks about, because Conor McGregor was the featherweight champion.
Yeah.
Which, it's just so funny to look back on because...
They didn't know all that would come of Conor.
Yeah, and we didn't know that Conor was going to move up to lightweight. We didn't know that he was never going to defend the featherweight belt. So they just talked like, yeah, Max is probably 1 win away, and he could be facing Conor McGregor again.
Yeah, because I don't even know. It sounded like the Nate number 2 wasn't made yet.
No, I think by this point it had been canceled due to Conor.
Yeah, because it was going to be 200 originally. Yeah. That's true. Now, can I ask one question about that 9-fight win streak?
Yeah.
Was Max's last loss, if I'm not mistaken, Dustin Poirier?
No, actually.
Or was it Conor?
McGregor.
Dustin was first. Or
so
the first loss.
There was 3.
Okay. I
couldn't remember. He lost to Dustin Poirier to make his record 4-1.
That was his UFC debut?
Yeah. And then he would win 3 straight, including a win over Leonard Garcia, and then he would lose back-to-back Dennis Bermudez and Conor McGregor.
So then he went on a tear.
Yep.
Gotcha.
On the flip end, Ricardo Lamas. So coming into this fight, still another guy who had really been hanging around the top. A guy who kind of, he was kind of like the featherweight Pantoja.
That's a good way to put it.
Because his losses up to this point in this division were Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes. It was a guy who hadn't quite been able to get over the hump to challenge for a belt or win a belt.
But he got right near the mountain top.
Wins over Diego Sanchez, which was his last win coming in here, and that was still when Diego was a very good fighter. Mm-hmm. Dennis Bermudez, another very tough guy. Eric Koch, Cub Swanson. Before that, he fought with WEC before that. So he had been fighting high-level competition for a long time.
Really, another guy that's kind of like of legend status of the lower weight class.
For sure, and for sure a guy who's going to be underrated as we look back on his career, because it appears his career's kind of done now.
Just recently retired, yeah.
And we'll talk about that after, but that's where we are right now. Both guys at very, Max is the guy surging, but in my opinion, coming in on paper, Ricardo Lamas is like the proven commodity.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost, and again, we'll get into like what came next, but if you look at it, it was kind of like, a number 1 contender fight sort of deal. It was 4 versus 5 with a lot of question marks in the division. The winner had a big thing coming next, we'll put it that way.
So this ended up being a pretty good fight.
Yeah, it did.
It wasn't
for the most part one-sided, but a good fight.
Yeah, like Ricardo always was hanging in there, but Max was just the boxing was just
the pace, the striking.
You had a very early part of the fight where these guys were just throwing, just standing flat, throwing just haymakers at each other. And then obviously the most iconic part of this fight, the last 10 seconds, Max points to the mat.
And they just
sling it out. Those were definitely the high points, but I mean overall
with two rare submission attempts in the middle.
I didn't remember that.
One was like almost a bulldog looking choke. It was real funky.
Yeah.
And then he tried the rear naked.
Well, it was a bulldog choke, but it was like a reverse, a reverse bulldog.
Weird, man. You don't see submission attempts often from Max Holloway.
So it was a pretty good fight though. I had fun watching it. Definitely a little one-sided, but that was, I mean, it was just another great performance for Max Holloway and another fight that showed that Ricardo Lamas really is a great test
He's
at
a
this
dog,
time,
man.
Did you have any other thoughts on that fight?
It's well put.
After this fight for Max, I mean,
gold.
What can you really say? He would win the interim belt at the very end of 2016 at UFC 206 against Anthony Pettis via TKO.
Was that in Toronto?
Yep.
Okay.
Then he would unify the belt with Jose Aldo. I won't go into all the detail about how Jose ended up back with the belt, but Conor going up to lightweight and then the whole boxing thing with Floyd Mayweather, that's the simple way to put it.
And the follow at UFC 200, Jose won the interim.
Yeah, Jose won the interim, so then he got promoted to the
once Conor
undisputed.
didn't return.
So then this was the unified belt at UFC 212.
In Brazil.
Max would win via TKO in the third round. And then after that, I mean, he had he only defended the belt 3 times, but it was an awesome run.
Oh, yeah.
He would TKO Jose again at UFC 218. Then he would have what really before this Calvin Kattar fight was the defining
masterful performance
against Brian Ortega, a fight that the doctor stopped after the 4th round.
Again, at that time, by the way, Ortega was a freaking undefeated. Everyone thought this is the end of Max right here.
First guy to finish Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
And then he would defend the belt against Frankie Edgar at UFC 240 before losing to Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 245. He would then lose the rematch controversially at UFC 251. He also, again, I talked about it with Dustin Poirier. Funny how those two are headliners from UFC 236, both on this card. He would lose when he tried to move up to lightweight to go for champ kind of. Yep. And he would lose that fight to Dustin Poirier. And then after those 2 Volkanovski losses, he just had that, one of the best performances of all time of any fighter against Calvin Kattar. Whew! Incredible performance.
And here we are with one of the best to ever do it, really. Only 29 years old. Crazy.
Now,
and for
Ricardo Lamas, he would follow this up with 2 straight wins. So good bounce backs.
No kidding.
Submission win over Charles Oliveira.
I knew you were going to say that. Damn it.
And then he TKO'd Mr. Jason Knight at UFC 214.
That's 2 solid bounce backs, man.
Yep.
I mean, he stayed right there in top 5, I'd have to imagine.
And then he would have back-to-back losses. He would be knocked out by Josh Emmett.
Oof, he gets like a truck.
And then he lost a split decision to Mirsad Bektic, a guy who, this was at UFC 225. Mirsad Bektic at one time was looked at as a very good prospect.
And now he's still somewhat underrated to a certain extent, but at that time,
I think he was just a guy that was a little overhyped, I guess, or just didn't quite live up to the hype. But at points in his career, he looked really good. After those 2 losses, he would TKO Darren Elkins. That's a guy you don't see getting finished very often. No kidding. Then he would be TKO'd at UFC 238 by Mr. Calvin Kattar.
Look at all this.
And his final fight, we talked about it, August 29th, 2020. It was fight of the night. We both agreed with that. He had a unanimous decision win over Bill Algeo.
That was a great fight.
Originally supposed to be, what's the guy? What's his name?
Here we are.
Leg locks.
Oh. Ryan Hall. There it is. He was
originally supposed to fight Ryan Hall.
We know what we're talking about. We just blank out sometimes.
But he ends up fighting Bill Algeo, who honestly
He's
looked pretty good after that.
He's been in some tough fights.
Spike Carlisle. So, yeah, he would end up having pretty... Honestly, it's just a very underrated career even after this. I was expecting to see a lot more red, you know.
That's a good way to put his
Like, sure,
career
you have
your...
he lost 3 fights after this Max one. After this Max fight, he would go 4-3 the rest of his career.
What did he finish with a record-wise?
20-8.
You know what?
He literally
look at the competition.
He went 4-3 after this Max fight. And I think the competition speaks for itself that he was definitely still underrated even at the end. Like, he probably should have still been ranked in the top 10, like, honestly speaking. And I didn't quite give him, you know, when I watched, or when I remember kind of breaking down that fight with Algio, I really looked at it like this was a guy over the hill.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that's quite the case, you know?
Yeah.
So, just wanted to give some respect there.
Shout out Ricardo Lamas.
Yeah.
I like that he was on this card.
Here's where things get interesting. We got our co-main event. And the least interesting part about this subject is going to be the fight itself.
Fair enough.
So your champion, Dominick Cruz.
The Dominator.
I mean, this one's pretty simple. The guy coming in to this fight was 22-1.
21-1.
21-1,
yeah.
Literally hadn't lost since to Uriah Faber. Back when he was just 9-0, went 9-1 after that fight.
What year was that?
WEC 26 in 2007.
So he went 9 years undefeated.
Yep. I mean, some of these wins, in WEC he beat Ian McCall, Joseph Benavidez again.
Greatest bantamweight of all time.
Scott Jorgensen, Uriah, and then he goes on to UFC. First fight, him and Uriah Faber.
Was that for the belt then, I'm assuming? He probably brought the belt with
him.
him.
Well, I think, so he technically won the UFC Bantamweight Championship in his last WEC fight.
Okay, so he came in the champion.
Yeah, so that's now whenever Scott Jorgensen gave him the UFC belt,
Gotcha.
and then he defended against Uriah. Demetrius Johnson, the best flyweight of all time. He would knock out, well, this is where... All right, I guess we do need to talk about the fact that Cruz's injury history is...
Oh, unbelievable, man.
Oh,
you talk about a guy that could... No telling what he could have done without the injuries. Poor guy.
And
he's got no knees.
Basically, up into the Demetrius fight, no problems for him. That was 2011. October 1st, 2011, he beats Demetrius Johnson. Guess when his next fight is?
2014?
September 2014. A nearly 3-year layoff due to, oh my God, ACL. They tried to put in
the knees.
They tried to put in like the
artificial
ligament, and it rejected it. Yeah. Oh my God! Like the guy went through everything. He had to vacate the belt. That's when Renan Barão became
best fighter in the world at that point.
Yeah,
one of. He
would come back at UFC 178, which is a card that I mention a lot because it's so star-studded. It was headlined by Demetrius Johnson and Chris Carriasso, but you had Donald Cerrone, Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor. This fight was on there, on the prelims, the headliner. And he knocked out Takeya Mizugaki 1 minute, 1 second into the first round. What a comeback.
You don't see that much from Dominick Cruz either. Wow.
Yeah. And then it kind of happens again. More injuries.
Yep.
Because we don't see him again until he fights for the belt January 2016.
Yeah.
So basically a 1.5 year layoff.
It was another ACL, if I'm not mistaken.
And this time, the champion was TJ Dillashaw.
Yep.
Who had that incredible performance over Renan Barão.
He shocked the world when he beat Renan Barão.
I mean, he was so young, and everybody wrote him off. And he not only did he beat him once, he beat him twice. Mm-hmm. So TJ Dillashaw was looked at like he was really building a resume to be the best bantamweight of all time. Dominic comes in and beats him.
And Dominick Cruz, by the way, has an aura of him of beating anyone to come out of American Top Team at this point. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, TJ was another top team... Or, I'm sorry, not American Top Team. Team Alpha Male. My apologies.
Yeah.
You get what I was saying.
I didn't notice that either.
My apologies. But yeah, so, the Faber fights, and we're going to get into the third Faber fight. The TJ Dillashaws, he would go on to fight Cody Garbrandt. Like, he was fighting and beating, outside of course, Cody. But that's for another classic review. So he had an aura around him of this, and this was another part of that with TJ. Yeah, and that was controversial.
And he won a split decision.
Yeah.
It was a very close fight. It headlined a fight night, January 2016. I think the majority of people say Cruz won, but it was at least close enough.
That's one I'd have to go back and watch.
It's close enough to where you could see it the other way, right? And then that's where we are here.
Yep.
His first title defense after reclaiming the belt after all these years of just layoffs and, almost being able to come back and then having another injury to pull him out. And he's fighting Uriah Faber, finishing their trilogy.
Yep.
A lot of this context was a miss on me as I watched for the first time. So being able to watch it here with you, it added a little something. Sense, yeah. It added a little something to it. And, geez, man, this guy was just on another level at this time.
His movement is second to none. It's so fun to watch him fight.
It's fun. And
you want to talk about unorthodox.
I mean, if you were to go to a boxing gym and do what Dominick Cruz does, they would kick you out.
Yeah.
They would say, you're not taking this seriously. You're doing literally everything wrong.
Little do they know he's one of the best fighters in the world.
He's one of the best of all time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so much so, you put him in your top 10.
Yeah. I think
high up.
6.
Yeah, it was pretty high up. So, this was just another class act performance from Dominick Cruz. I had him sweeping the cards 50-45. One judge did give Uriah one round.
I don't know which one that could have been, but
okay. it was constant pressure. And the thing about Cruz's footwork is that he will pressure you up against the cage, and then he'll jump back, and then you kind of step out, and then he comes in and hits you with a combo.
Yeah,
and then he's out again.
And you can't even call him like an orthodox or southpaw fighter because he doesn't have a stance.
He literally fights you straight.
He fights square.
Fights square.
Like shoulder width apart, square, hands low.
And that's where you
see... And then he'll just glide in and out.
And in Uriah's post-fight interview, he even said, he's like, Cruz got power because he got dropped in the second round.
Yeah.
So, like, you wouldn't expect a guy that stands like that to have really any power because you kind of need the body, I don't know, what would you call it? Physics tells you that you want to stand either orthodox or southpaw in order to garner more power with that hand.
Dom said, I'm
going
to try this.
And dropped him.
And shows the well-roundedness of his skill set in this fight. Wrestled the wrestler in Uriah Faber in round 1 and out-wrestled him. Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people didn't think that Dominick really had it like that on the ground.
Yeah, and in the process, Uriah Faber damn near loses his britches.
Yeah, I want to let you talk about this because I know
I just thought it was hilarious. Yeah. So, Uriah Faber's Reebok trunks... We're down around the ankles almost in this fight. We've got the black boxers hanging out. And Joe Rogan is fascinated here.
Yes,
we're talking, they're at one point up in the cage, into the corner, right in front of the commentary team. Joe Rogan is staring a hole through Uriah Faber's ass.
Yes, he is.
Hilarious. He said, Mike, Uriah's about to lose his pants. We're going to have to, the ref's going to have to step in here. And Herb was like looking around, trying to see how low they were. They eventually get out. He pulls them back up. Then in the 5th round, it gets a little worse. Yeah. We got a little butt crack action.
You get a little butt crack in the 5th round. And then there was some guy with a camera right up on his ass.
It was just hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Funny enough, the guy with the camera was one of the stars of the MMA show Kingdom. If you haven't watched that, it is on
forgot
Netflix.
That's who it was because I was like, "Who's that guy? Who's that guy recording Uriah's ass?"
Yes. If you've watched Kingdom, it is Jay. So one of the main characters, the son of Alvy, the fighter in the show Kingdom, was videotaping and probably to this day on the iCloud has video footage of Uriah Faber's ass.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
There's that.
I mean, it was a very one-sided fight.
Yeah, it was all Dominick Cruz.
But going back and watching it, I enjoyed it a lot more than I did when I watched it for the first time.
That was probably very unique for you to watch then.
I remember not being too into this fight the first time I watched it. I was just like, not a lot's happening.
You were wanting KOs probably. Then.
Yeah, I mean, that's just me being a filthy casual, I just remember the first time watching this, I remember this was the fight where I was like, okay, well, this is the bad side of MMA. Like, going back and watching it, I could appreciate the technique a lot more. And you just saw Uriah was never comfortable.
And there's another fun fact about this fight, isn't there, Noah? The end of this fight, I should say.
Because you actually were one that pointed it out to me. So, obviously, as all title fights go, and all fights in general, you get your 2 fighters usually, as long as both guys are able to stand and be present. They read off the scorecards, Bruce Buffer does, and then the ref will raise the hand of the winner as it's announced. For title fights, Dana's usually in there, has the belt, and he'll wrap it around the waist of the winner. Dana's absent.
Yeah. I said, wait a second here.
Who was it that...
It was Lorenzo.
Yeah. No. was one of the
Or no, it was Sean Shelby.
Sean Shelby.
Fertitta was in there, but Shelby did the belt.
So Sean Shelby wraps the belt around, and you were the one that actually made me notice it. You go, oh, where's Dana? And it clicked, and I went, oh, this is going to be a great episode.
You took me down a wormhole here because I didn't know this.
So
this is all news to me. So
this is going to lead into a lot of stuff that happened after this fight. Basically, there was a preview video, a hype video shown on this card for UFC 200, you know, the big milestone.
Mm-hmm.
The video shows the 3 title fights on the card. You got...
And now at this time, they were...
Yeah, at the time. So you got your interim featherweight belt, Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo. You got your women's bantamweight belt, the champion Miesha Tate facing Amanda Nunes. And your main event, the grudge match for the light heavyweight title, the rematch between Daniel Cormier and John Jones.
And we'll get into all the UFC 200 stuff down the line in another episode. But
so they showed that video. It was an awesome video.
Yeah.
And then the video, they show the 3 fights kind of like almost like a somewhat poster, little promo images. And then you just hear, "Can you see me now? Can you see me now?"
I remember seeing that live on TV, like, geeking out.
Yeah, you were.
Oh my god, he's coming back!
We were freaking out.
He's back!
And all of a sudden you see Brock Lesnar and he's got a little smirk on his face. And then he just punches the camera. And
I shit myself.
And then it comes back and Joe Rogan's like, "What was that?" He was like, "Is that real?"
They dropped a bomb.
So, for people like us, and I mean, even though you were a huge fan at this point, you weren't necessarily following some of these journalists on Twitter.
That is very correct.
Because now we, like, literally have their notifications on to get the fight updates and all that. It took me a long time to really get to that point. Really, doing this podcast is what kind of got me.
Yeah, we are now part of the MMA Twitter, like, elite.
Yeah. But
at this time,
we didn't. So this was news to us, this whole thing. However, approximately, I don't know, an hour before this announcement, a guy by the name of Ariel Helwani tweets out.
The biggest reporter in mixed martial arts.
Yes, the biggest. He's been the biggest for literally 2 decades. I mean, the guy
he works hard.
He's an awesome guy. He's awesome at what he does.
Yeah.
However, on this night, he might have... I don't know if he ever expected the consequences of this, but they are still felt to this day.
Yeah.
He puts a tweet out saying that the UFC are planning to bring back Brock Lesnar for UFC 200. Now, some of you would go, well, that's nothing
just
new,
rumor.
right? You know, that's nothing new.
Yeah.
These people, that happens all the time, right? Like, reporters are constantly getting these scoops and they're putting this stuff out ahead of time.
It's their job.
You know, since we were WWE fans, like, we see it a lot today with WWE, you know, because it's all pre-scripted.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the winners get kind of at least rumored to be revealed before the card. You see it with, like, movie spoilers, things like that. Like, it's a normal thing for a lot of people. Dana White and the Fertitta brothers did not treat this like any
Brock coming back was huge for them here.
And the thing was that it was so hush-hush, according to Dana. Literally only a select minority of people knew about this. So it gets announced. Ariel Helwani was not one of them.
Yeah.
It gets announced via Ariel.
This was before the promo played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dana has to basically go backstage during the title fight between Cruz and Favors. That's why he is not there when the belt's being wrapped around. Because essentially you have a standoff backstage between all these different execs, basically pointing fingers at the other. Think of that scene in The Office where you got Michael, Dwight,
and
Andy pointing the finger guns at each other.
Yeah. That's
what it was.
Yeah.
And hell, you know what? The part where Pam's involved too.
Yeah. Why not throw another?
There was multiple.
Now, also, did Ariel get thrown out of
this? Ariel and his crew, I don't know if he had a cameraman.
He was working for one of the outlets at this time.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one.
Yeah, I don't.
Might have been MMA Fighting.
MMA
or Junkie or Fighting, one of the two.
He gets escorted out of the arena. I believe on his way out, he runs into Dana, and Dana was like, "You fucked up, pal."
Since then, Ariel has never been invited via the UFC to another event.
Dana says on this night that Ariel Helwani is now permanently banned from all future UFC events. And as the biggest reporter in the sport, that was a firestorm.
Yeah.
And we'll start with the fact that to this day we don't know how Ariel got the information.
Not a clue.
But apparently, according to Dana and what he's talked about, he's not really went into a ton of detail, but he said that basically he nearly apparently ruined a very important partnership. I don't know what that's alluding to.
Well, you got to think this was all in the midst of the
sale.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's what he's alluding to, or if there was just more of the personal friendships with these execs, the working relationships. But apparently it was a huge shit show backstage. So Dana's basically missing all this co-main event, dealing with this. I don't even think he's out there when the hype video is played. He's pissed.
Yeah.
Bans Ariel for life.
Yeah.
That...
Now the guy works for ESPN.
Well,
MMA.
that ban lasted about a little over 24 hours. Actually, 48. Because I believe Monday, Ariel Helwani does his show on YouTube. And at this time, it was still a little different. He wasn't working for ESPN. It was the MMA hour or whatever.
Yeah.
So he goes on there and basically explains his side of the story. And, I mean, it was very emotional. He was crying at points, talking about how much he loved all that he's done for the sport, how much he's loved it, and how he felt betrayed. And Dana always describes it as like he threw a big pity party for himself. Well, the UFC rescinded that ban because there was a lot of backlash against him for doing so. Because there's just that debate on, like, was Ariel just doing his job, or should he have, Dana said he stole something from the fans, like the fans who read that tweet, they didn't get to see what we saw. So it's kind of that debate, like, do you feel like Ariel was really stealing something for himself, or do you feel like he was just doing his job? It's just...
And I see it as the latter. I do. To an extent.
I'm not going to say I don't understand.
It's his job to break news. However...
I will say there have been times I've been pissed when I've read something and then
before the big announcement.
Yeah. And I'm just like, man, like, come on.
Do I have to mute my
NFL draft used to be terrible for that. Back, I think they finally stopped allowing these reporters to do this, but for a few years with the NFL draft, they were tweeting out the selections literally like 10 seconds before. So if you had the notifications on for some of these reporters of the NFL, I would look, Bengals selected this person. Well, what the point is? What's the point of watching?
And then on the TV, you're like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, so I see both sides, but it appeared the majority of people sided with Ariel on this issue.
And then so much of the time since this, not all of it, but much of it has been Ariel being independent until the ESPN MMA days. So did he just go to events following this as an independent journalist / reporter?
Yeah, so after that ban was rescinded, he was still able to get his press credentials for these events. But really before this, I mean, him and Dana used to be very chummy.
So he's still allowed to come to events. So I rescind what I said earlier. But can he do like I don't think he's talked to Dana since.
No.
Aren't there certain things that he has not done since that day? Maybe
I mean, what? Like what?
I mean, I guess
he hasn't interviewed.
He's been at post-fight pressers and stuff, I suppose, and pre-fight.
He hasn't interviewed Dana.
So really, it might just be Dana interviews being the biggest thing. Outside of that, he's kind of done it all still, I suppose.
I mean, does he interview fighters?
I mean, if he's at post-fight pressers, I guess he technically can. I don't know. I just started thinking about that. So I mean,
there's a lot. I think there's a lot of benefit. Like Brett Okamoto gets a lot of exclusive stuff with being that he is so trusted by the UFC.
Yeah, Brett does a lot of the on-site
stuff. Breaks a lot of news for the UFC.
Yeah, that's true.
Ariel used to kind of have that role, and now he doesn't.
Yeah.
Another thing, when McGregor Mayweather was being put together, that was Showtime, I believe. Showtime Boxing. They wanted Ariel to be on the press, not the press. They wanted him to be a part of the team, kind of surrounding that event.
Yeah.
And Dana literally made sure that he was not. So
Like Michael Jordan with Isaiah Thomas and the Dream Team.
So needless to say, this rivalry, this hatred,
still burns bright.
To this day.
You know what I'd love?
What?
Them to burn the hatchet. And Ariel just drops a bomb one day saying, exclusive interview coming tomorrow.
You know who might be a very important person for that to happen? Daniel Cormier.
Or us.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Because now you got Ariel and DC. They do.
They do great. They do
a weekly show together on YouTube with ESPN MMA. Ariel constantly jokes like, DC, why won't you say my name on the broadcast and stuff? He's like, say something to Dana. Put in a good word for me. So it appears Ariel doesn't have too many. I guess he's not too upset over the whole ordeal
the Dana
anymore.
side. Yeah.
Dana still. Anytime Ariel's brought up in an interview, like I remember his interview with the Schmo, he said like, because that guy the Schmo he had challenged Ariel Helwani to a charity grappling match, and Ariel never responded, and he told Dana about that, and Dana's like, well, that's even worse than fighting a girl. He's like, he is one of the weakest human beings on this earth. And it just went off. So
maybe one day.
No love lost between those two. But that is why Dana is absent.
There you go.
It's a small detail that you wouldn't even notice if you watched today.
That's a fun backstory to give, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you watched the pay-per-view today, you would never notice that. But seeing as... we're here
you can tell we watch this shit a lot.
We're here to inform you guys.
I was like that gif of Leonardo where he's pointing at the TV. That was me like, where's Dana?
Yeah,
that
exactly. So I thank you for pointing that out because I might have forgot all of that. And that was super important when you get into the context of why this is a classic pay-per-view. I mean, there's so much. All right, here we are.
We're not just handing out classic titles to random pay-per-views.
Come on.
Come on.
Now, we're here for the main event.
This is it. This is what we're here for.
Michael Bisping getting his rematch against Luke Rockhold because Chris Weidman, 17 days before this fight, couldn't make it.
Was it injury, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
I don't know what kind.
I don't remember what the injury was, but I know it was bad enough to where he had to...
Coming off of just filming a movie with Vin Diesel, Michael Bisping on 17 days' notice takes the call.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So Weidman pulled out due to a large extrusion herniation on his neck.
Ooh.
That's right. I remember the videos. Remember the videos where he had that like thing?
Oh yeah, I remember
MMA
that. It was on forever.
MMA World. I remember watching those.
That's when we got big into that.
So it was like leaking, like fluid from his spine and stuff.
Yeah.
Real nasty shit.
Yeah.
But that's why he's not in this fight. So, kind of in a turn of events, the number 4 ranked Michael Bisping gets the call here for a rematch that probably not a ton of people were asking for.
Yeah. Dare I say, the UFC can count on the count.
That they can.
Yes.
So, leading in here, Michael Bisping, I mean, what a long career this guy has had. He won season 2, season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter. Had a very nice run. Started out 14-0 in his career.
Beast. Big name in the UK.
He lost to Rashad Evans, but then he would go on to win 3 more fights, so 17-1. Then he gets knocked out by Dan Henderson. Then he would beat Dennis King. Then he loses to Vanderlei Silva. Then he goes on another 4-fight winning streak over guys like Sexy Yama. Jorge Rivera, the fight where he spit on Rivera's corner and got in Rivera's face after the
what
fight
a savage
and told him,
Michael Bisping is.
Yeah, called him like an asshole and stuff. He TKO'd Jason Mayhem Miller. Then he would lose a unanimous decision to Chael Sonnen.
I forgot about they fought.
Yeah.
Wow.
Would beat Brian Stan, another guy who works for the UFC, or did work for the UFC. Then he got TKO'd by Vitor Belfort. A very important fight in Michael's career because that is where the eye problems.
Yep.
He got a detached retina after that fight. His eye was really never the same, and we'll talk more about that.
And with that fight, Michael Bisping ever since has been a huge advocate for going against PED usage and everything like that.
Because Vitor was he was very much a poster child for that and for TRT.
TRT. And so essentially, Bisping looks as like, okay, I lost an eye because a guy was cheating.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since then, he's been a big advocate for that. So that's a little side story.
Yeah. So this run here is really just win one, lose one, win one, lose one. I mean, then he follows up the Vitor loss with the win over Alan Belcher, another underrated fighter. Loses to Tim Kennedy. TKO's Kung Lee, and then he has the first loss to Luke Rockhold, a submission guillotine choke. But then he hits a 3-fight winning streak. Finally kind of overcomes a little bit of a hump there. He has decision wins over CB Dalloway, Talis Ladies, and then probably the biggest win of his career at that point was a unanimous decision win over Anderson Silva.
Was that fight of the year that year? That had to have been top 5 or something.
It's not listed as that, but it was listed as fight of the night.
Oh, unbelievable fight.
An awesome fight, you're right. And, I mean, it was probably the biggest win of his career up to that point.
Now controversial, a little. But
I mean, if you want to talk about it, you can. I just
no, I don't want to get into it. I'm giving.
But it was probably still the biggest win of his career.
100%. He knew he had made it there.
Yeah. So after this win, I mean, he was probably just going to keep fighting. Maybe a guy like Jacare or I don't know who was, or maybe fight Vitor.
He would have had to fight one more to get to a title.
But instead, he's the guy that's willing to step in 17 days notice and fight Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold, on the other hand, had been pretty much, for the most part, had a really flawless run here.
Yeah.
Coming into this fight, his record was 15-2.
Stud. He was a stud, man.
He lost his second ever pro MMA fight, but then his only loss after that between Strikeforce and UFC was a nasty spinning heel kick, knockout, and follow-up punches from Vitor Belfort. That would happen in his UFC debut. I mean, he was dominant in Strikeforce. He was their middleweight champion when they folded. In the UFC, he loses that debut, but then he goes on to win 5 straight fights. Costas Philippou, Tim Bosch, Michael Bisping, Lyoto Machida, and then at UFC 194, headlined by Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, he would get the TKO over Chris Weidman.
And win the belt.
So here is his first title defense against Michael Bisping. Would you like to talk about the fight? Talk about the action.
You know, for the most part, not a ton of action in that one-round fight. Mm-mm. I guess you would call it one of those feeling out rounds to a certain extent. Both definitely getting some feelers in on each other. They were landing.
I will say I noticed this time watching it, not trying to cut you off after I was giving you the
I do it all the time.
But I did notice that Michael was landing a lot. And I know Joe even said on commentary.
He's keeping his chin
He said Luke Rockhold's chin's really high and his hands were down.
Yep.
Things I noticed this time. I know hindsight, all that.
When it came down.
I just noticed Bisping was landing quite a bit. Like, Rockhold was pretty much just continuing to push forward, but wasn't really defending.
Yeah, and so what you have to think about here when you talk about hands being down, that eventually was the downfall in this fight. So Bisping is an orthodox fighter, meaning his right hand's his dominant power hand. However, he finished his fight with a left hook. So, Rockhold's fighting with his hands low, and significantly his right hand was really low because he didn't have the threat, or at least he thought he didn't have the threat of Michael's left hand, being that he was in an orthodox stance. That bit him in the ass real quick because what was the time into this?
3 minutes, 36 seconds.
3:36 into round 1. Bisping throws a little right jab to get Luke's hands down and to the side. Luke begins to kind of back away, hands down, left hook right over top. Boom. Cracks him. Goes down, gets back up. Boom. Michael cracks him again after holding him still.
Yeah.
Making sure he was going to hit.
Crazy.
Another left hand drops Luke to the fence. Bisping goes in. Boom, boom, boom. And new. History made. The first ever champion from the United Kingdom, from Great Britain, Michael the Count Bisping. Paid in full, dare I say.
So tell me, as someone who was watching more than I was at this time, how shocking was this?
It was unbelievable, especially because of what Luke had looked like. And Bisping was always that guy, like you said, the win one, lose ones. He had finally made that big win over Silva, and he was finally streaking, and it was just really, like I said, how Dustin Poirier puts it, paid in full. This man had been there and done it all, paid his dues, took advantage of the opportunity, fighting on 17 days' notice when many people would not fight a guy like Luke Rockhold on 17 days' notice. This guy was one of the best fighters in the world at this time. Bisping takes it, and literally after the fight says, that was the easiest fight of my life. Barely got touched in that fight.
He did say that.
Incredible story. I recommend to anyone out there with Fight Pass or you're on the fence of getting Fight Pass, they do a great series called The Year of the Fighter. Mm-hmm. And it's basically the year leading in, or just the whole year, and then they cap it off with a championship victory or something big happens in a fighter's life. Their most recent episode was on Michael Bisping. It's about 38 minutes long. It's a solid watch. And it talks about this 2016 year that was for Michael Bisping. Unbelievable. Chilling. Brought me to tears. Very good. I highly recommend that for anybody with Fight Pass.
And I believe this is true, and I apologize for not being 100%. I think it's a record that still stands. This was the most fights that it took for a UFC fighter to
earn that first shot at the title.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird way to word it. The most fights in the UFC prior to getting that first title shot. Yeah. 26. Man. And he was always a guy that hung around the top, right? It was like he was a gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm, but he couldn't get there.
Couldn't win the big one. And then
we talk about it a lot with the guys nowadays in the podcast.
There's tons
the
of
same way.
I mean, there's certain... Even a guy like Dustin Poirier at times has maybe had that reputation.
And, we talk about the Magnis, the Chiesas, guys like that is what Bisping was looked at, really. Yeah.
And being that he was already 37, I think, at this point, definitely a lot of people didn't think that he was going to be winning a belt. Mm-hmm. But he wins it pretty brutally and swiftly.
Yeah.
And it was just an amazing... And, Luke Rockhold was never the most popular guy.
He was a very... confident, with cockiness stoic. For sure, just figure. Yeah.
He was very stoic, but
the good-looking guy, the muscles.
He's a model.
The modeling,
So he was not the most well-liked guy. So it was, and Michael Bisping at one point was one of the most hated fighters in the UFC.
The tough, gritty kid that just talked shit from Britain, ran
but
the
then
streets.
He definitely, by this point, had earned himself into the good graces of the MMA fan base, which you always love to see. Something I hope a guy like James Vick can do someday.
Yeah.
But with that, he would tie at this point.
Yes. Since broken, but at
the most wins in the UFC with 19. And he tied Mr. George St. Pierre on this night. Since been broken. Cowboy Cerrone holds the record.
Yeah. So Bisping went on to break it, and he got it first. At 20,
and then
Cowboys.
Well, then run. GSP would tie it again.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Funny enough, then Cowboy just said, "You know what? I'm just going to take it." I believe
there's a couple other people who have since passed him too.
They're hanging around. There's a lot of guys up there right now.
Even guys like Jim Miller or Dustin.
Yeah, Dustin just hit 19 with the Conor win. So
there's a lot of guys. I mean, Charles Oliveira at some point will be making his way there. There's a lot of guys that'll probably pass that, but huge milestone nonetheless.
Hall of Famer for a reason.
Yeah, And, credit to Luke Rockhold, but, that dominant run to kind of get himself into this position, but it was never quite the same after this. He would follow up with a win, a TKO over David Branch.
Convincing win. It was a good performance.
It was a headline to Fight Night, September 2017, so over a year later. And that's kind of the story here is that he really just kind of became less active because then he would headline UFC 221 against Yoel Romero. It was supposed to be for the interim middleweight championship
for Luke
because Yoel missed weight.
Yeah.
So if Luke wins, he's the interim champion and then would fight Robert Whittaker, who was out with injury. But if Yoel wins, there is no interim champion, and Yoel would brutally knock out Luke Rockhold in the third round.
Very bad. Then kiss him afterwards.
That was February 2018. And he would make the move to light heavyweight.
Luke's a big guy.
Yes.
So I was kind of looking forward to it.
I was too. Yeah. And he made comments leading up that he was the guy to beat John Jones. And his first fight at light heavyweight was against Jan Blachowicz at UFC 239. A card headlined by John Jones against Thiago Santos.
Yeah.
Co-main, Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm. A little fight, Jorge Masvidal, Ben Askren.
Okay, what happened in that one?
Yeah, well, it only lasted 5 seconds, so not much.
That one, gotcha.
And this was the fourth fight, so what a hell of a...
That's a hell of a card. We were watching that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And Jan would brutally knock him out.
Broke his jaw.
Yep. And that happened in the second round.
Left hook.
And that's the last we've seen of Luke Rockhold. That was July 2019.
Now, he has not officially retired.
No, he's
even been training with DC and all that stuff.
And DC has said that he thinks Luke will fight again.
Still younger.
Luke has still made comments that, like, he's... But it's going to be 2 years in July, so...
Give that head and jaw some rest.
He's 36 now, so...
36 now? Okay. Not a lot of time left.
No, but
Now, if he comes back in, he's going to get a big name. I think. I would imagine. Now, when I say big, I'm saying like a top 15 guy, not necessarily
I would assume so.
And if he comes back, Noah, 185 or 205, what do you want? Or maybe since he's older now, it's probably harder to cut the weight. Maybe do 205.
205.
Luke's a big dude.
Yeah, he's a big guy. On the other end, Michael Bisping, after this fight, he would only go 1-2 the rest of his career. He would have that title fight with Dan Henderson at UFC 204. A fight that was very close.
Banged up. Woo-wee. His eye, you want to talk about a mouse or moose, whatever they're called under his eye? Ugh.
He, say a moose?
Moose, mouse.
It was a mouse.
Mouse.
He's a moose under his I don't know why I'm picturing like...
A moose, a dead-ass moose. Picture a moose or a mouse on his face. You get what I'm saying.
So he would beat Dan Henderson on the judges'
Very
scorecards.
Controversial. That was a B-dub trip, if I'm not mistaken.
I wasn't with you guys.
Oh no, I was back home for that one. Yep.
And then he would have back-to-back losses. One of the biggest pay-per-views of all time. One of the best pay-per-views of all time. He would headline with the returning George St. Pierre at UFC 217, a fight where George St. Pierre would win in the third round via a rear naked choke.
In a great fight. Bisping had his moments,
man. Oh, yeah. That was a hell of a fight.
Oh, yeah.
Bisping actually, I actually kind of thought, like, when I was watching it, like, halfway through the first or so, I was like, I think Bisping's going to win this. I said George didn't look comfortable, but then he must have heard me.
He hurt Bisping bad and went in for the kill and wrapped in the choke.
So that was November 4th, 2017.
Now here's the one I wish wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, so this one's a little strange.
Very random.
3 weeks later.
In Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken.
On my birthday, November 25th, 2017, in Shanghai, China, he would step in to fight Kelvin Gastelum in the main event, and he would be knocked out 2.5 minutes in the first round.
It was bad. One shot.
And I mean, everybody was giving him a lot of credit for taking this fight because they were just like, man, what a warrior, what a badass.
But then you see what happened.
And everybody was rooting for him, but man, after...
It was a bad knockout, man.
And it's just disappointing that that's kind of the way his career ends.
Yeah. The GSP loss, that's...
He had spoke like he wanted to have one more fight, but unfortunately that detached retina, the doctors had warned him that it looked like his good eye was starting to have that same
he
effect.
has a glass eye now.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing we were talking about. I mean, that's the...
can't fight.
That's kind of the damage that would be permanent for him, is he would end up getting a glass eye. Sort of claimed that he might have won the belt with a glass eye. I have a hard time believing that the medical staff at the UFC would have cleared him, but hey, man.
Hey, if he did,
hell of a story there. So yeah, that is your main card for UFC 199, and I think a great way to kind of tie this all together is, we'll first talk about the bonuses and the post-fight press conference.
You can't leave this episode without it.
Because this whole... If you want to talk about a little extra special...
This is very special. Tyler, if you're listening, you're going to love this. Anyone out there that knows this presser, you're going to love this. This is big for us here.
So, fight of the night, Marco Polo Reyes, Dong Hyun Kim. Performance of the night, bonuses.
Isn't that funny? That's his name.
Performance of the night, bonuses. Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson, funny enough, because they would be fighting each other
Now, what happens when you win a bonus?
You get, I believe the total is a sum of $50,000.
Or some might say...
$50K. So post-fight press conference happens, and this would be, as I'm going to kind of tie this all together and say this is kind of the end of an era in some ways.
Yeah, true.
This was the last time you would see this kind of press conference for the UFC. They used to do these post-fight these post-fight press conferences where you basically had all of the winners and losers on there together at the same time. But this is the best use of it.
This gave some great moments.
So, Michael is already like drinking.
He's got the beer with him at the presser.
This man is on cloud 9.
Oh, yeah.
And Luke Rockhold
Rightfully
just had
so.
the worst day of his life.
Oh, yeah. Polar opposites.
And they go back and forth quite a bit. I mean,
yeah.
And Michael Bisping is just on another level.
Oh, he's letting Luke hear it.
His trash talk is incredible. Luke's is leaves something to be desired. But the line, right?
The one-liner.
is
we gotta set it up though.
Well, okay. I'm trying to remember some of the other comments. I mean, it was, Luke just saying like, you got lucky.
Yeah, it was one shot thing, and
he's
blah,
like,
blah, blah,
I
blah.
will come back and kill you and stuff.
But
and Luke being like,
Mike's like, you just got knocked the fuck out, Luke.
Mike's like, all right, calm down there, buddy. Stuff like that. So then he's like, I think someone asked him about the knockout, like.
Yeah.
I forget what the question was, but he's like.
Well, they might have even mentioned a performance bonus because of the knockout or something.
Well, he goes, I believe that knockout was performance of the night bonus. 50K, baby.
50 G's, baby.
Oh, 50 G's, baby. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
And Luke,
legendary.
And Luke looked very upset.
Yeah. And that was literally the end of an era for post-fight pressers.
Because I think the UFC was like, all right, we can't
do this. We're talking like the only guy separating Bisping from going to punch Rockhold again was Dana White.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Let's maybe not do this.
Yeah. Absolutely hilarious moment there.
Yeah, so we just had to talk about that because that's one of our probably favorite in-jokes to reference when we do this stuff.
That's where you got the baby portion for your outro.
Yes,
from that line right there. So Mike Bisping, shout out to you, my friend.
Shout out to him. To kind of tie it all together, end of an era, right? Not only is the press conferences changed up after this to make them a little more boring, but probably better overall.
They're better, yeah.
Also, the UFC would be sold a month later, 2 days after UFC 200, July 11th, 2016. The UFC was sold for $4 billion.
That's with a B.
To WME, IMG.
Entertainment Group, whatever.
Yep, Entertainment Group. Yeah, I mean, $4 billion.
That's a lot of money.
So that would kind of mark the end of the Fertitas time.
Yeah.
What a legendary duo they were. They were really the financial side of things that kept the UFC going.
January of 2001 to July of 2016.
Yeah, Dana would remain president to this day, obviously, but the Fertitas time had came and went, and I mean, I'm sure they are not saddened because $4 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But this would be near the end of Mike Goldberg's end as a broadcaster for the UFC. His final UFC broadcast would be about 8 months later on December 30th, 2016 at UFC 207.
That very well could be another
This is
classic
definitely,
review.
It could be, for sure. And I will say that this is one of the few times that I've ever been kind of mad at the UFC.
It was very awkward, wasn't it?
They didn't there was no thank you video, there was no acknowledging it on the broadcast. They literally just signed off like normal, and then Goldberg was gone.
So it was nice hearing Mike Goldberg for 199's commentary.
Yeah, I agreed. And that's when John Anik would take over. Now you got 3-person commentary teams. Joe Rogan slowly but surely seems to be kind of slowly leaving. I don't want to say he's leaving, but he's become less and less prominent on these broadcasts. Now you got 3 people. Now he's still only doing the U.S. broadcasts.
Yeah, domestic events.
But even with COVID, that's became less of him because a lot of these events have been in Abu Dhabi, things like that. But yeah, it was really the end of an era, and this would kind of lead us into the WME era.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were very skeptical about this sale because WME, IMG, are an entertainment group.
Exactly.
So, sure, have there been times where things have happened and you might turn your eye at it and go, was that a WME
Brock
thing?
coming in the cage with DC.
Yep.
Sorry, just one that came out on me.
The hype video for UFC 207 that focused all on Ronda Rousey.
Poor Amanda.
Amanda Nunes getting no shine.
We're going to have to do 207 at one point.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's little things, some of the, Bisping, GSP some of these fights that were booked that was like, okay, these super fights. Like
There's been a lot more super fights, so I'll put it that way.
I don't think there really has.
I just think they're so more... It's only been a few years,
the champ
but they're so prominent.
thing, the
champ's big.
But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like these money fights.
Gotcha.
But yes, the champ thing has definitely been a little bit watered down.
Yeah.
You know, it was a huge
deal. It's nice having like a break.
It was a huge deal when Conor did it, even though he never defended either one.
Yeah.
But when he was crowned that, it felt like a huge deal. But since then, it's just... Now it's like, okay, awesome. Like, you want to... It's like it's almost just the same as winning any other belt. It doesn't feel like you have two.
Unless you're Amanda.
Yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to say here. Did you want to touch on anything else?
That's a deep dive, if I've ever done one.
I agree.
Fun event. Really is a great event. Yeah. Again, all the UFC events are on UFC Fight Pass, people. Plus, Year of the Fight, or whatever I said it was called. Go watch the Michael Bisping one. Really incredible. So if you have Fight Pass, go watch UFC 199. Let us know what you think. And watch Michael Bisping's Year of the Fighter. That's all I gotta say.
Highly recommend this main card. You want to give it a grade?
Ooh.
So
are we doing A
letter
scale
grade?
Or, okay.
So let's just start by saying UFC 1 we didn't give a grade for, but...
That shouldn't count. Can you grade that one?
I'd give it an A.
I'll give it an A. Fuck it. It was the first event. So now here. UFC 199.
And we can do plus and minuses. Give us some flexibility. I'm going to give UFC 199
A minus.
I'm going to go B plus.
Ooh. Okay.
I'm going to go B plus.
Okay.
I was thinking B, but B plus feels... some very great moments here. Obviously, iconic moments. Bisping winning the belt.
Max pointing.
The Max thing, yes. But, I mean, really, you got two very quick finishes here. The main event and the fight that opened the main card. You got that awesome fight with Henderson. There's really not a bad fight on here. No. Even the third and fourth fight.
Dom put on a masterclass.
He put on an awesome performance. Max had a great performance against
Still
Ricardo
a war,
Lamas.
though.
Still a good fight. You can't really complain about anything that happened on this card.
And the Brock announcement happened technically on the card.
I mean,
you don't see it on Fight Pass. But
don't take that into my grade, really. Okay. More so just the fights. Yeah, but I think a very solid pay-per-view, and I think one that over-exceeded compared to what it looked like it would do on paper.
Well said.
Agree. But yeah, so until, I guess, man, I've been talking so long. What do we got?
What's next? Friday.
So Friday. UFC 258 preview.
Oh, baby.
It's going to be somewhat of a deep dive on a couple of these fights,
We're going to do our research.
Yeah, because we got a couple fights on here that are being added late, and they do not feature names that are very well known to us. So we will be doing our homework there. But it's headlined by Kamar, Usman, and Gilbert Burns. A very intriguing fight.
You ain't kidding. This is starting, by the way, 6 UFC title fights in the next 42 days come Saturday. UFC record.
Yep, UFC record. And then Monday we will be obviously recapping all of those fights we preview on Friday.
And may I add, big news segment coming Friday as well. Big news segment.
Yeah, so tune in Friday. It's going to be a huge episode. I think it's going to be a long one.
Yeah.
But until then, Dominic Lee. Tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
On Twitter, on Instagram, at DCLee14. Find the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And as for me, if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram, at NTBaker_, you'll be taken to our link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms that the podcast is on, along with our social media platforms. That includes the Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, along with Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there, baby. And there's a couple links for the Anchor page. First, leaving a voice message. Something that we really want to hit hard in 2021. If you have a thought of an upcoming fight, a news story, a video idea, if you just want to say hi or tell us we're a piece of shit, you got 60 seconds to do it on that link. Also, there's a link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. That just provides with a few dollars a month, and all that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast. Whether it be the audio equipment or down the line doing a video podcast. So again, you can find all of that if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram at NTBaker_. But with that, we're out. We'll see y'all on